Good morning, and welcome again to another session of Rehabilitation Hospital of Indiana's RHI, Stories of Courage, Hope, Attitude, and Inspiration, and gratefully brought to you by Wilson Kehoe and Winningham. I'm Janine Stelmack, one of the Donor Services Officer here at Rehabilitation Hospital of Indiana's Foundation. We have a special guest today, Mr. Ron Brady. And what makes this story special, I think this is the first one that we've had. He's a transplant patient, and you're only like a few weeks out from discharge, right?
Actually, today would be 3 months.
3 months?
Yes.
Okay, so it's, yeah.
Yes.
So Ron, I'm going to go ahead and let you go ahead and start this real quick, your journey to RHI. And
Yeah, it started out very badly. Cirrhosis was the diagnosis. Unfortunately, that was 35 years of a not particularly positive lifestyle when it came to alcohol, and a pretty serious alcohol addiction as time went on, and into about 2015 it got pretty serious. And I started to feel some symptoms, but hadn't really been diagnosed with cirrhosis at that point. I did have some kidney issues. We went to a hematologist for blood work, and he said, by looking at you and by how, I was yellow, I mean, it was just really bad. And he said, I'm going to run this blood work, but when I get the results back, you need to go home and pack and be ready, because I'm probably going to admit you into the hospital because my kidneys were failing, or we thought they were. And so we left that and we didn't go home. I said, Deb, I'm not feeling well, I need to go now. So we went right to the emergency room, and that was the first time when they did the blood work, the ER doctor, staff physician came back and said, your MELD score, and I won't get into what all that means, but if you've been through what I've been through, you'll know, was 27. The highest range is 40, and he told me I had 90 days to live, and I was like, that's pretty terrifying. Turns out that I was there for 6 or 7 days. I went home, still not feeling well, started to get the fatigue and all of that, and wound up going to Fairbanks I checked myself in for a voluntary treatment program. It's going to be about 10 or 12 days. I made it 5. And on this morning of the 6th, they came to wake me for breakfast, and I was unresponsive. And they called the ambulance from Community North, which fortunately was not very far away.
Right there, yeah.
And they took me over there and put me into a 7-day medically induced coma. It took me another 3 days to recover from that, but in that process, that's when the real diagnosis of the cirrhosis and how bad it was. And at that point, then I really knew, I was in trouble. And the doctor, my St. Vincent liver specialist, said at the time, look, you can do all the things we're telling you to do, but you can't repair your liver. And so diet and exercise and losing weight, all those things are going to be great for you, and it'll help prolong it. But ultimately, if you spend one more afternoon drinking like you have for the last many years, you'll be gone in 120 days. So that was the second time I was told that. I didn't want to hear that anymore. So, that kind of led to, at that point, we started having the conversations, and he said, look, this is when they told me, as I mentioned to you earlier, that 12 to 18 months from the time you start the transplant process and the protocol with IU transplant, it could be 12 to 18 months before you're through and on the list and a liver is available. And he said, if you don't do this starting now, you may not be here by the time this all is over. So we went to IU and got involved in all of that.
So did St. V, where was the connection from, so you, St. Vincent, that's when you got the official diagnosis?
He basically gave me the phone contact for the IU transplant team and said, you need to call them right now. So at that point, everything I was doing transferred from, well, shortly after transferred from St. Vincent, which had all my doctors and everything for 10 years, transferred over to IU to the transplant team, and they took over everything from medication to, all my treatments, everything. And in February, we started, mid-February, we started the program. We went there, had our full consultation, and as I was mentioning earlier, we went home that afternoon, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, this is overwhelming. And, all the requirements they have to get on the list. And so Debbie had gone to work that morning, and I was home by myself. And, I had already found the Lord earlier in 2018. I'd been baptized a couple months after that. And it was starting to mean something to me. I was starting to learn and understand it, but I just finally said, Lord, I can't do this on my own. You've got to lead the way, because I won't make it. Left to my own devices, this ain't gonna work. And so it was like, that's exactly what happened. It's hard to describe unless you've been through it, because all of a sudden I'm going through all this protocol and all of these testings and all these scans and all of these things, and IU just kept scheduling it one right after another. They were so great. And, I was doing blood work once a week. They knew where I was. They knew what my MELD scores were, all that. And in 4.5 months, I was on the transplant list, which was just mind-boggling to me. And even more importantly, what we had been told would be a many months process for finding a compatible liver. I got a phone call from the transplant coordinator on Monday morning of the 6th week that I'd been on the list, saying they had a liver that was suitable. And I went to IU, and the transplant happened at 1 o'clock the next morning. And from start to finish, the process took 6 months, not 18. I mean, the Lord just walked me through that whole thing. And not to mention Debbie, who I'm almost to where RHI rolls in, but I do have to say that if anybody's been through what I've been through, you understand clearly. I went through 18 months of living hell health-wise. Multiply that times 10, and that's what Debbie went through. Here I am in the hospital in a coma, and the doctors are saying, we're not sure how this is going to work out. Every day she was there, not knowing from one day to the next what was going to happen. So my gratitude for her is second to none. So anyways, after the transplant,
How long were you at IU?
well, that's more part of the Lord's story. I was in IU. They did this surgery at 1 o'clock in the morning. They told me that previously in our conversations, they said 6 to 8.5 hours is the length of the surgery. You'll be in ICU for 2 to 3 days, and probably here and the average is about 10 days. Well, they did the surgery at 1 o'clock in the morning. At 6 in the morning, I was in ICU. They completed everything. There are times where they will leave the muscles open and just staple you, but so that they can go back in and check for swelling and bleeding and that. They didn't do that with me. They were so satisfied with the procedure that they stitched me all up, and I was in ICU for all day Tuesday and part of the day Wednesday, most of the day Wednesday. They moved me to a regular room on Wednesday. By Thursday morning, they had me up and walking. And I had to be with a nurse, but they walked for, I think I went out for 3 or 4 times for sure that day with nurses or tech support. And Friday morning, the nurse came in and said, let's go for a walk. And when I got done, she said, you don't need us to walk with you anymore. I mean, I had to have my walker, but she said, you're off the restriction. You can move freely around the 4th floor, at any time you want to. So that was great. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that's what I did. I was like, why am I here? All these people are sick. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But as it turns out, I was there those 3 days, and they were going to release me on Monday, which was day 7, which is just phenomenal. And I was feeling so good. And I got up that morning and I went into the bathroom and I turned around to sit down, and we really don't know what happened, but this is how I got to RHI. I turned and I thought my knee had given out, but it turns out that maybe it was the bones broke. But I turned and I had no ability to put any weight on my right leg, and I just slid down the wall and looked, and I broke the tibia on the inside, and I was a compound fracture on the fibula on the outside. And I think because I was in shock more than anything else, I didn't feel any pain. It was crazy. I felt no pain. And even though looking down, I'm going, I don't think that white thing is supposed to be sticking out that far. But again, the Lord was right there, because walking by my hospital room was one of the 2 orthopedic surgeons. Him and his assistant came in. They're the ones who triaged me, got it all back to sort of together, put me on the body board, and took me back and put me back in bed. I mean, it was seamless, really. Fortunately, it happened in the hospital and not at home. But so that led to, okay, now it's rehab. You've got to go to physical therapy. I mean, here I am, I'm 60 years old, never broken a bone in my life. Now I can't put any weight, 0 weight on my right foot. I have to walk with a walker and hop basically on my left foot. That's not possible. I was like, what am I supposed to do here? So when I got here, they brought me over on a Monday. By the time my insurance got straightened out and was on board, and there was an issue. We had 4 patients on that floor those 2 or 3 days that were waiting for a bed here because you guys were so busy. So it was Monday afternoon they brought me over, and I started physical therapy the next morning. But I was a vegetable, basically. I mean, they'd already cut all my stomach muscles. I had no core muscles. I couldn't sit up. I had to lean. Everything was off my shoulders. And, I couldn't walk, obviously. I had to go in a wheelchair because I couldn't use the walker. I had no strength to be able to do that. But between the occupational therapy and the physical therapy, the therapists here are just fantastic. I mean, it's regimented. There's no fooling around.
No,
it's not a
they're not messing around.
Hey, what do you feel like doing today sort of thing. It's okay, here's what's happening. And there were a couple days where I said, I can't do this anymore. We need to come up with other exercise or something, but I can't stand up again. I'm worn out. And so they accommodated that, obviously, but I was here for 3 weeks, and by the time as that progressed, I could start to feel that I had a long way to go, but every day I was feeling better. And the crazy thing was, all of the symptoms and all the fatigue and all the tiredness that I'd had prior to the transplant was all gone, which is pretty common and part of the program. Once your liver starts functioning, your whole body starts functioning. And
You could really feel it. You could
instantly,
just how well you started feeling,
almost
right?
within a couple of days. In fact, when we were here, Debbie came in one afternoon and she said, because after the transplant, they said, someone needs to be with you 24/7 for 60 days after you get home. You're not going to be able to do anything, but also in case you fall, anything could go wrong. Somebody has to be there to, get this fixed. Well, I did the first 30 days here.
Right. And I know Dr. Littell, and he's kind of the one who he kind of befriended you per se, right, or referred you to do the RHI, Dr. Littell on Unit 1.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
yes.
One time when we were asking about transplants, he goes, it's not like the movies where you get your new organ and you're okay to go and go home. That's not how it happens. You were so sick before, you got stabilized at IU, right, and then you came here, and you don't realize how much that takes out of you, right?
It's exhausting, and then to do 3.5 hours of physical therapy every day, and I was done by 2:30 or 3 o'clock every day, and nothing else the rest of the day except dinner. And I was like, that's good, because I don't want to do anything else.
Yeah.
But when we started out, it was using the board, the slide board, to get from my wheelchair up to the mat. I did that for a few days, didn't need to do that anymore. I could get up and turn myself. The walking in the cast was the hardest thing. They took a long time, and I couldn't put any weight on this foot. So what Molly was one of my physical therapists for most of the time I was here. She would, when they wanted me to stand up, they'd take me to the parallel bars and have me stand up. But before I did, she would put her foot underneath my right foot so that she could tell, and she would say, no, you're putting pressure on this, you can't do that.
Pressure, yeah.
So, they were so cognizant of my restrictions and what I couldn't do that it was, the 0% weight was like the topic of the day. Every day I was here, you cannot stand on that. You can't do anything with it. And so,
So
by the time I went home, I was able, the last 2 days I was with Doug. Molly had gone on vacation. I was with Doug, and he said, I want you to get up and start to walk. I walked, not even thinking. I was just following his instructions. I walked the whole 20 feet of that parallel bar. I was like,
surprised yourself.
Oh my gosh, how did I do that? He goes, do it. I did it 3 times that day. He said, do it again. I'm like, I don't think I can. But it was extraordinary, and it was all because, they knew what I needed and they kept pushing, and I'm so thankful that, I was here. And the final thing I want to say is that what I really found interesting is I met quite a few people that were here as patients. I was amazed at the number of people that were here from Terre Haute and South Bend and Fort Wayne and from all over Indiana that had plenty of facilities in the towns that they were in, but they came here because this was their premier rehab center, in the area. And
yeah.
It was amazing to me, the number of people. I'm like, your family is 3 hours from here, that's crazy. But they were like, this is where we needed to be. And, clearly with all that you do here, my liver transplant in the ankle was like way down the bottom of how serious people are here with brain injuries and those kinds of things. And it's amazing. What this facility does for people is just incredible.
We've had a lot of folks say that they felt like RHI gave them their life back.
For me, I'd already had my life given back by a donor I'll never know. But the ability to manage myself came clearly from here. If I had not come here, I would not be doing what I'm doing right now.
Right.
I just wouldn't be. I wouldn't have any not only the strength, but just the knowledge of, hey, this is what you can and can't do, and this is some exercises you need to do, and those kinds of things. I mean, just learning how to take care of yourself was, you know, huge.
And you're already scheduled up to do outpatient?
I am. I hopefully get the walking boot off on the 12th of November, and I've scheduled my first outpatient physical therapy for the 14th. And we'll just evaluate it and see how long that needs to go. I think I can go for 12 or 14 visits or whatever if I need to, but I don't think I will. I mean, I'm feeling really good. My ankle is really, really healing well.
And the therapist will help you.
Yeah,
determine that
exactly.
too.
Yeah, that's
They'll
it'll
be
be totally up to them. I mean, they'll be the ones that decide, hey, you can do this at home. There's not much else we can do for you, helping you here. But at the same time, I've been down this road so many times that I don't have any expectations. I'm to the point now where if they say it's going to take this long, then that's how long it's going to take. When they told me 2 weeks before I was going to release, it was going to be August 31st, I was like, I'm here 2 more weeks, but there was no way I could go home. I mean, I couldn't do anything. So by the time I left here, they had me, you all had me equipped to do essentially, as Debbie said, that one day here, if you hadn't broken your ankle, you'd already be home outside doing things. You'd be back to your normal self. And I've looked at this from the very beginning as just a blip on the radar, because I came to IU for a transplant, which went storybook perfectly. Breaking my ankle might have been the Lord's way of saying, don't get ahead of yourself here. It's not, yeah, I know this has worked out great, but all right, back her down a little bit.
Well, we're gonna wind this up, but we do want to, Ron, thank you for coming in. I know you love your life. Debbie is off camera, and we know from all these interviews that we've done, support is huge.
Absolutely.
They're so far as in your recovery, doctors, we thank the donor. Is it April, Sharon? April is a National Donors Month, so we thank anybody who is an organ donor for that. Thank you for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure.
And,
I'm glad to be able to share.
Yeah, and we are, so for those of you who don't know, Rehabilitation Hospital of Indiana is a collaboration between St. Vincent and IU Health, so we're thankful for that and that you will take advantage of all that. So thank you again.